All right, everybody. My next guest is a great guy. I just love this guy. He's such a positive force who has been a big part of the comedy scene for over 40 years. He's even the subject of a documentary called Who the F is Jeffrey Gurian? I'll tell you who Jeffrey Gurian is. He's a comedy writer, a stand-up comic, a host, author, producer, director, media personality, doctor, assistant, clinical professor at NYU in the oral medicine, oral facial pain department. He's a lecturer, a spiritual healer, who discovered a cure for stuttering, which he even used himself to cure himself of that affliction. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Jeffrey Gurian. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Don. That's some introduction. Thank you so much. It's so great to be on with you, and I was so glad to see you at the party the other night.
It's always great to see you. Yeah, it was a great party. Governor's Comedy Club out here on Long Island threw a party. It's always great see all the comics from this local scene come in and mingle a little bit, and to have you there is always a pleasure too, my friend. Always great to see you.
Thank you. The same here.
Yeah. Now you are a true Renaissance man, and you've been there and you've done it all. 40 years. The last time, I mean, you even did my show, Put Up, Shut Up, and Stand Up, was the game show I did. You were one of the judges, and I got to be honest, you were one of the best judges we ever had.
Thank you. So
yeah,
nice. That's really nice.
Yeah, and it's true because your insight and your wisdom and you didn't pull any punches either. You let people know if they stepped out of bounds or something like that, and that they weren't prepared. And yeah, so I think that kind of honesty is important.
He's the only one who did his homework. I'm very disappointed. I had a lot of confidence in you, and I was really pulling for you, and you didn't even bother to write jokes on you. I was hoping you would at least use your phone. You didn't even have jokes to say. And listen, when you're in a competition, if you have to take comedy seriously, if you're going to be good at it, all right? And so when you have the opportunity to be in a competition, the least you can do is write jokes and bring them in and prepare. You could have used notes. He used notes.
No, yes.
You used nothing. And very often he would say something and you didn't have a comeback. And I was very disappointed. I think that if you're going to be in the comedy world, that you need to really do your homework and come in prepared. If you get a spot in a club and you come in unprepared, you will never work there again.
You know what? But I believe in constructive criticism, not mean-spirited criticism, because I respect everybody that goes on stage. It's the hardest thing in the world to go out and try to convince strangers that what you think is funny is actually funny. So not everybody's great. When people start out, they're usually not so good. So I think it's important to encourage people. You know, as a comedy journalist, I was covering the comedy scene for more than 20 years. And if anybody had a bad set, I never wrote about it because I hate critics. I hate people who criticize other people. There are people in this world that's their job. They're critics. And they criticize film critics and theater critics. And I don't think they've ever acted or done anything like that, but they criticize. And that drives me insane. I hate that.
Hey, we're real. We're real. We get down and get dirty. I'll take it. We were burning each other when Martin Luther was only a gleam in his mother's eye. I'll take him down.
So people trust me because if somebody had a bad set, I just wouldn't write about it. I leave it out. I don't mention it. Right. You know,
and that's important. It is important too, especially for, like you said, newer comics or people just coming up or trying out new things. Because sometimes a critic or someone with a negative approach could end that person's career right then and there. It could deplete them of their confidence, right, and all that, and basically taking away their dream. So I think your approach, constructive, is is the way to go.
Thank you. Well, comics are artists, and artists are very sensitive. And you're so right. A very hurtful comment in the beginning could end somebody's career. You know, it took me many years to get the courage to go on stage. I was writing comedy for a lot of big stars for a long time before I went up and performed. I always wanted to, but I didn't have the courage to do it. And I finally, I wrote a book called Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way. I've been battling fear all my life. For whatever reason. I'm not sure exactly what the reason was, but I grew up with a lot of fears. And fear is a bully that wants to keep you from achieving your goals. It tells you you're not enough, that you can't do something that you really want to do. And I thought to myself, hey, if I think I'm funny, I need to find out. I can't go through my whole life and not know. So
Right.
I finally, I went to, I don't know why I'm blanking on the name. There was a place on First Avenue, all the way downtown. The guy who ran it, his name was Face Boy on Allen Street. And it was a very famous place. It went for many years. They would have people perform till 2, 3 in the morning. There would be a lottery. And when you came in, you had to pick your name out of a hat. And they would stay until 3, 4 in the morning until everybody had a chance to perform.
Wow.
And that's like Rob Pritchard is the guy that ran the place. Face Boy was the MC. He called himself Face Boy because he had no hair. His face went all the way up his head,
Face Boy, is he still around? Is Face Boy still out there on the scene?
If we Google him, I haven't seen him in many years, but if you Google him, I'm sure he and Rob Pritchard are still around.
We got to
And
find those guys.
it was such an interesting space on Essex Street.
Nice.
And it was collective conscious. No, I don't know. It's driving me nuts. But anyway, and then my first comedy club I did, well, I also did a spot at a place on 12th Street, a little cafe. It was like they were doing all kinds of performances. But my first time doing in a comedy club was at New York Comedy Club.
And this is our next performer. He's a very funny guy. He's making his stand-up New York debut. Give it up for Jeffrey Gurian! Thank you very much. Boy, it feels good to be back on stage again. Because I had retired from performing for a while. And to show you how good I was doing when I retired, I was the only one who knew I retired.
And it was about 17 years ago. Mike Bichetti happened to be in the audience.
Ah, yeah, good old Mike. Yeah, that's awesome.
Always remember, and he came over to me afterwards and he's like, that was great. You should really keep performing. And that's the kind of thing that keeps people going.
Yes.
Too many comics don't congratulate each other when they get off stage. They're just silent. I always say, if somebody had a good set who was on before me, I always tell them, good stuff, man, great set. People hear that.
I agree with you, and I think that's part of like the problem with these days with creating a good scene is that there's no support of each other. Everyone's kind of trying to do their own thing, or they get into little cliques, and even then, I don't know if they tell each other, good set or any of that kind of stuff. And I think now too, so many comics seem to have their guards up, worrying about somebody taking their jokes or their premise or their style or what have you. That it just kind of a different vibe than it used to be. Do you get that?
Well, theoretically, no comic should be able to take another comic's jokes because your jokes should be so personal that no one else should be able to do them.
Right.
You're writing your own material. It's coming from your head. I do stuff that's me, man. And I don't think anybody could do my stuff. I feel my jokes are very personal.
Right. Yeah.
If I say, I'm very excited, I just found out I'm starring in a new poem, I can pull that off because I have a different kind of image, Right. A lot of guys can't do that kind of stuff. And I talk about, I'm excited. I'm opening a men's room, I just, and you know what I hate about it? I hate when guys come in and ask if they can use my restaurant. And I'm like, look, pal, I'm renting a men's room here. You can't just come in here to use the restaurant. So I do stuff like that. And most comics can't do that because it's not them. So you should be doing jokes that are your persona. What I do, I'm working on a new independent TV show. I got hired as an exec producer. The other producers are in Philly. And it's going to be a competition/reality show. And I'm going to be mentoring a lot of young comics. And one of the things I tell them is stop doing bathroom humor.
Yeah.
I hate that. When guys come up and they're very graphic with this bathroom, it's so ugly and so disgusting. If that's all you could think of, to as a premise for comedy, then you really shouldn't be on stage. As far as I'm concerned, when I'm out to dinner with somebody and we're at a show and I take a woman to a show, I don't want to hear that.
Right, it's true.
And people in the audience laugh to be polite.
Right, yeah. And I think like the Pornhub type of jokes have become like the new airline food jokes. You know what I mean? Like they're so become so hacky. Like I watch a lot of these comics and they go up there and they start talking about, Pornhub and bathroom humor and this and that. And it's not original. And like you said, it's not something you want to take your date to see.
Yeah, really. I like people that are wordsmiths.
Yes.
One of the reasons that Jerry Seinfeld is so popular for so many years, he's a true wordsmith. He loves the language. There's a craft of writing jokes. It's not just about what you did that day. A lot of comics just get up and, oh, what happened to me this afternoon? Or they start talking about the people in their family. If it's funny, it's funny. But I like people who take a premise. When I came up, I learned from some of the greats from the golden age. And you'd find a premise that you like. They would say, write me a hunk. That's what they would call it in those days, a hunk of material, which meant you take a premise and you build a lot of jokes around that premise.
Right.
It's not just separate one-liners that don't mean anything. Like Mitch Hedberg was a master of that. I mean, he would do non sequiturs, one-liners that were not connected, which is a very difficult act to memorize. But
yeah.
I always admire people who admire the craft of writing. Comedy is about words, about changing words, which is why it's so hard for people when English is not your first language to understand comedy, because you're playing with nuances, the meanings of words. And so I always respect that. Jerry, they used to call him the doctor of comedy because he would help other comics reword their jokes. When he was emceeing at the comic strip, I don't know if you remember, but I did the book on the comic strip. Chris Rock wrote the intro.
I love that book.
All those guys, and everybody said Jerry would come in every night with 5 or 6 new premises on an index card, and he was just writing for hours every day. That's the kind of thing that I really admire, when you take your craft so seriously.
Yeah, Jerry Seinfeld was very disciplined, and I think a lot of other comics kind of followed that, where to have that at least a couple hours a day every day to write, no matter what, because he looked at it like a job, like a 9-to-5 job, and he's like, hey, if I'm getting paid to do this, I might as well put the time in and build my craft, and that's what he did, and he's, like you said, a master wordsmith and observational comic, and to see the world through funny lenses, and then to know how to articulate it and know what word is the funnier word. Like Albuquerque might be a funnier word than Texas or something.
If you write a joke with the word divining rod, chances are it's going to be funny.
Right.
Certain words are funnier. And when I teach comedy, that's one of the things I talk about. I keep a lot of old drafts, because when I write jokes, I rewrite and I rewrite and I rewrite, and I read them a few days later to see them with a clear eye, because you're too close to it. You can't judge the night you write them. And sometimes you have to change the order of the words, and it depends on what word you end on in the punchline. So in those days, there was no cable TV. You had to work clean.
Right,
if you wanted to do TV, you had to have a clean set. So all those guys, Jerry and Paul Reiser and George Wallace, all the guys that started out in those days, they all work clean. That was the only thing that you could do. And to this day, Jerry works clean. It's so funny. I was performing at the West Side Comedy Club one night, and I had an 8:30 spot. And Jerry decided that he was home, and he called into the club. He said he wanted to go on at 8:30. And when he decides to perform, he texts all his followers to let them know, so people will show up at the club. So I'm sitting there waiting to go on. There was somebody who was supposed to go on before me. I see Jerry coming down the stairs with his baseball cap down over his eyes. And this particular night, he came over, he said hello to me, which doesn't often happen. He's usually very, very focused, but he came over and said hello. The person who was supposed to perform saw Jerry and left. She didn't want to, I think she didn't want to go up in front of Jerry. She said she was tired, and she just left.
Wow.
So the manager of the club said to him, do you want to go right up? And he goes, no, I'll wait. And she goes, Jeff, you're up. So I had to go up and perform in front of Jerry. And every time, I work basically clean, but I do throw in a few F-bombs. And every time I did it, I felt guilty. I'm like, Jerry's here and I got to do that. And because I'm so used to, that's what the club audience expects.
But if you really want to know what you look like, ask a little kid to describe you. Trust me, you want to fucking kill yourself.
I can do, like, if I'm working, like, there are certain gigs where they ask you to work clean. I can do that.
Right.
My material lends itself to that. I do a lot of stuff about confusion. Don't you hate it when you wake up in the morning and you're really in the mood to vote and there's no election? What are you doing?
That's a great line.
So I have a lot of, a lot of clean material. But that night, and it's funny because very often I talk about the weather, cell phones, and texting. But that night I decided for some reason I didn't do that. And Jerry went up, and what does he talk about? The weather, cell phones, and texting. And I was like,
nice. Yeah, he was.
I don't know if it would have been good if I had done it before him or not good. I don't know, but it was just so interesting that it was an experience for me that I had to go up right before him.
That's pretty cool. And I will say about clean comedy, I'm all for it. I think clean comedy is great. I think, the comics that do clean are, and successfully are amazing, because I think there are some comics that might lean on the curse words, but every now and then I think an F-bomb or something like that helps to punctuate a joke.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. It just gives it that little, yeah.
That's how I use it. I use it like to punctuate the joke.
Especially coming from you, because the people might not expect an F-bomb from you. And that's even funnier.
Yeah, that's what makes it funny if you step outside of yourself. If you're someone that they don't expect.
So he called me the other night complaining that wherever he goes, people telling me he looks like Josh Groban. I'm like, what the fuck are you complaining about? At least you get somebody normal. I get if Phil Spector fucked Elton John.
They don't know what to expect with me. I have to dress I dress down when I go on stage. I take off anything. Like I always have Purell hanging from my belt. For 20 years, I'm carrying Purell. I take off everything because I'm very distracting to start with. People are looking, so I don't want to give them anything extra to look at. I want them to be able to listen to what I'm saying.
Yeah, I guess that when you say that, because you when you enter a room, everybody knows you're there. You have a presence about you. You have a style, a fashion, the way you dress, your hair, even your glasses are like rimmed red and everything. So you pop, you stand out. So I guess that can work against you maybe if you go on stage. If people, it's almost like a hot girl or a muscular comic. I was
just going to say that. Yeah, a beautiful girl. Also, it's very hard for them because people are wondering. They start thinking about you. What's this about?
Right.
So I have to make sure like that I don't dress the way I often dress when I'm going out for the evening. People have asked me to perform. Sometimes I'm in a place and I'm in like black tie or something. And I'm like, I can't go on stage like that. It doesn't feel right. I don't have that. I don't have the energy because I think it's too distracting to people. That's how I feel about it. And I could be totally wrong. I'm also a motivational speaker. So I talk about something called don't believe your thoughts. And just because I think that doesn't mean that it's real. You create all your thoughts, and your thoughts are not necessarily true, and they're not necessarily based on your experience. They're based on your interpretation of your experience. So I could be totally wrong about that. I might do great in a tuxedo, but in my mind, my thought tells me they're not going to laugh if you're too dressed up.
Right.
You have to dress down. I dress like this on stage, just plain colors. I don't wear any bright colors like I usually wear.
Yeah, And I have my theory about that stuff, what you said about your mind, about thinking and don't believe your own thoughts. But I think about luck. Like, let's say somebody has a lucky pair of socks or lucky this. I think that is lucky to that person. If you believe it, then I think there's something to it. And you know what I mean? Like what do you think about that? Do you think that about lucky charms and things along those lines? Do you think it's real? If I believed that this is my lucky sweatshirt, does it make it lucky to me?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I believe in all positive things. And I talk about that too. I open my mind to all positive things and I try and close my mind to all negative things. Like, I don't want to know about voodoo because
Right.
I understand that it only works on you if you believe in it. So
Yeah.
I don't want that to enter my consciousness.
Yes.
I believe in things like reincarnation because I was doing things as a kid. Like, if my sister had a stomach ache, I could take it away with my hands. Or, as a clinical professor, I was taking away headaches with my hands, and I was teaching the other doctors how to do that. And I learned that as a child. No one taught it to me. It came to me intuitively, which opened me up to the concept of past lives, like reincarnation could be real. So who knows?
Right.
But it's better to believe that it's true than to think that it isn't true, because it can't diminish you to open your mind to that thought.
Right.
So I allow myself to think of all positive things. So it's a very positive thought to say, I have a lucky sweatshirt, I have a lucky this or that, whatever it is. I carry these certain coins with me every day. I carry certain things in my pocket. I carry a statement about fear on this wrinkled piece of paper. I carry it every day because I believe that you internalize information that you carry with you. And it's a very powerful statement about fear. And if there's time, I'll read it. It takes about a minute, but it's
I would definitely love for you to read that, because I think here's my take on fear.
Yeah.
And tell me if it's in sync with what your fear. I think with some fear, actually, yeah, it was more about failure, but with fear too, I think that it's kind of a wall that you could put up on yourself, and the hardest thing, and it's almost like being your worst enemy with fear.
Well, you know what? Look, I work with a lot of stutterers. I stuttered very badly through my 20s and beyond, even into my 30s. I couldn't even say my name. I could never say Gurian. And now I work with stutterers all over the world. I realized one day I didn't stutter when I was alone. Many stutterers, that applies to many stutterers. They can speak fine, but they don't realize it because they don't test it out. I realized I didn't stutter when I was alone. I only stuttered when I was trying to talk to somebody else, which told me, and I consider it grace, but it told me that you can't have a disability based on your location, right? If a man has a limp, he limps in every room of his house. He can't go into a room and close the door and walk perfectly. But if I could speak fine when I'm alone, theoretically, it means there's nothing wrong with me. So I made a decision that I was not going to give up until I cured myself, because I went for speech therapy and no one was able to help me. Because unfortunately, most speech therapists don't know how to cure stuttering, and they've never stuttered. And they don't know what it feels like, which doesn't mean that you have to have a heart attack to be a cardiologist. You don't have to have every disease in order to cure it. But when it comes to something psychological or emotional, it helps if you work with somebody who knows about it, who cured it themselves. And so my fear I grew up with a lot of fears, and I don't know why. I had a very loving and supportive family, but a lot of things made me nervous, and I'm always battling fear. I never let fear stand in my way. Like in 2019, I went to Japan alone. It was the scariest thing I could think of to do. I challenged myself because traveling is hard for me. My ADHD kicks my butt and I get lost very easily. So imagine how I felt. I went all the way to Japan by myself.
Wow.
As a test to see if I could do it. And I spoke the little Japanese that I had learned. I took level 1 3 times. I conquered the Japanese subway system just by going on it every day. I was lost, Don. I was lost every single day in Japan. Every day. One day, the first day I was there, no one told me, in New York, when you take the subway, all you need to know is what stop you get off. It's pretty easy to find your way to the street.
Right.
Not in Japan. In Japan, when you get off the subway, there are 18 to 20 different exits, and each exit takes you to a different part of the city. They admit it's the most complicated subway system in the world. I was stuck underground for an hour. I couldn't find my way to the street, and no one spoke English. They told me before I went, everyone speaks English. No one speaks English there. Like, in the hotels they speak English, but the average person is not bilingual, So I finally found one person in a store that knew enough English to get me to the street, I would still be there. It was incredible. It was just unbelievable. So I'm fascinated by people who fight fear. You know, I conquered so many things in my life. I'll read this little thing to you. It's very quick, but it's very.
Yes, please. That'd be awesome.
Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small doesn't serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that others won't feel insecure around you. We were born to manifest the glory within us. It's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. To me, that is the most powerful statement that I've ever read, because it says it all, that fear is a bully that wants you to stay in bed with the covers over your head and not do anything.
Right.
And once you conquer the fear, you become an inspiration to other people, which is the thing. Like, life gives everybody obstacles. We all have obstacles to overcome. And some people are crushed by them, and some people draw on this inner strength that they're not even aware they have sometimes, and they manage to overcome tremendous obstacles. I actually wrote a book about that too after I recovered from COVID, and it's called Facing Adversity, Stories of Courage and Inspiration.
Yes.
And it's true stories of amazing people who overcame incredible things. And I wanted to get back to something that you said before about community in the comedy world, that it can feel very lonely sometimes because comedy is kind of a solo profession. There's no more duos anymore, like in the old days, you know?
Right, yeah.
You write by yourself, you go out on stage by yourself, you travel to the gigs usually by yourself. But what I learned about community, there's a very strong community. When I was sick, when I had this heart attack, and then when I was in the hospital with COVID double pneumonia, the comedy community rallied around. You know, Ron Bennington announced on Sirius XM that I was in the hospital. And I was too sick to answer anybody. I started getting messages from people sending prayers and sending positive thoughts to me. And I was too sick to answer. But I have to tell you how powerful that is, the power of kindness. And the comedy community rallied around me. And it was so special for me to see that, because in our everyday life, we don't tell people what they mean to us.
Right, yeah.
And I said, it's a shame that you have to be so sick to know that people care about you. You know?
It's true.
Yeah, because in our everyday life, we just don't do things like that all the time, you know?
Right.
And it was a very special thing. And I realized how there is a comedy community and we do care about each other. And, you know, things have changed over the years, but it was a very powerful experience for me. And it really helped me a lot to recover.
And you had COVID in the beginning when before we knew a lot of what we know, like in the early, right? Like early,
Yeah.
like March of 2020.
The day they declared it a pandemic, Don, March 11th.
Yeah.
That's the day they declared it a pandemic. That's the day I got sick.
Yeah.
And I put off going to the hospital for 2 weeks. On March 26th, an ambulance took me to NYU Langone, and they saved me. You know, it was a series of luck, complete luck, because it's a weird thing, but I say I was very lucky that I had a heart attack years before, because I've been on blood thinners all these years. I never stopped. They told me I could stop, and I had a feeling I should just stay on them because I'm not getting a bad reaction. They didn't know that COVID caused clotting in the early days.
Right.
A lot of people died from clots. So I'm on the blood thinner, and I have Z-Pak, the antibiotic, in the house, and I started myself on that on the third day, because the third day when I was sick, it went to my throat. Whenever I get sick, it goes to my throat, and I keep azithromycin in the house, Z-Pak, and I stayed on it. You're supposed to stay on it 5 days. I wound up staying on it for 10 days, and that saved my breathing. And when I got to the hospital, I didn't know they were using that in the hospital. They were using Z-Pak, hydroxychloroquine, and zinc before they politicized hydroxychloroquine.
Right.
When they put me on that, the next day my oxygen stayed at 96%. And after 4 days, they sent me home because they needed the room. They were out of rooms. They were putting people in the hallways already.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's crazy.
It was crazy. And when the ambulance guys wheeled me into my apartment, you know, they wrapped me like a mummy. I said, just uncover my face. The people in my building will think I passed away. You have to just, they wrapped me up. Like I said, please, I can't even see. So they wheeled me in. And when they saw all the pictures of the comedians, they wound up hanging out for like 20 minutes, asking me questions about everybody. And I was like, listen, guys, I'm sorry. I'm still sick with COVID. I was wearing a mask and, like a shield, a face shield. It was, and it literally took me months to recover. I stayed home for months. I was afraid to go out, even when I felt better. An angel of a woman in my building was buying me food.
Oh, wow.
How kind some people are. She found out from the doorman that I was in the hospital. And she said to me, I want you to tell me what you need. Give me a list and I'm going to shop for you. And I felt very awkward. I'm used to giving, but I'm not used to receiving.
Right.
And it was a very awkward feeling, but she did it literally for months. She would leave bags of food. I would tell her what I wanted, and she would leave bags of food outside my door. And I said to her, one day I said to her, what did I do to deserve you? And she said, you're helping me become a better person. Wow. And I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing. That's really pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of very kind people in the world.
And a lot of that came out during the hard times, is when you see the real true humanity in people and the kindness.
Yeah. I mean, the last 3 years have been very hard for everybody. People are totally stressed out, and it's been a rough time. Not everybody processes things well. Still so many people walking in the street in Manhattan wearing masks. I'm in the elevator today, a woman with mask and surgical gloves. I'm like, that was 2020. I don't know, but you can't say anything to people. Maybe she's immunocompromised. I don't know.
And like you say about fear, that really put people into a true fear state, where some people, like you said, that they're terrified to get sick. Even now that we've come a long way. There's the vaccines and medications, and it's subsided quite a bit. There's herd immunity has kind of is happening.
Kind of kicked in, right? That's what it feels like.
Yeah, it feels kind of we're getting back to a normal time, but there's still people that are so afraid, and and that's a different. Like, I don't know if there's different levels of fear, but I think that's a different kind of fear, because but I think it all needs to be overcome some way. But I remember there was a mentor of mine who drew a circle about, he said, this is the comfort zone, right? And this is outside the comfort zone. He goes, the magic happens outside the comfort zone. It doesn't happen in your comfort zone. You have to break out.
You have to expand your comfort zone. Just yesterday, I was telling that to someone. I'm working, I work with stutterers, and the ones that are in New York come to me, and we work in person. And I was just explaining to this woman how she has to expand her comfort zone, because most stutterers speak in a very quiet voice. And when I have her speak loud, she doesn't stutter. And it's so interesting. And I explained to her why. Her mind doesn't recognize that voice. Her mind only needs the voice it knows to stutter. If she speaks in a different voice, she doesn't stutter. So it's a fascinating thing. And I said, it feels uncomfortable to you to speak loud, doesn't it? And she said, very. And I said, well, you're challenging your comfort zone. So I want you to challenge yourself that way, because when you stop stuttering, your voice is going to be louder. You're going to project. You're going to enjoy hearing your voice. In comedy, we always project.
Right. Yeah.
You can't whisper on stage.
Yeah.
You want people to hear what you're saying. And so she got it. But I was just saying, expanding your comfort zone. It's battling fear. That's what I do. That's what I did in Japan. That's what I do with everything that makes me nervous, I have to expand things that other people seem to be able to do comfortably. That's what I need to do. I'm not talking about skydiving or stuff that's dangerous, where of course you could be afraid of that. I'm talking about the everyday things that people seem to do comfortably. The airports are filled with millions of people who are traveling. I need to be able to do that too.
Right, right.
When I tell myself I can't, I'm limiting myself. You know, the only limits are the ones that we create for ourselves.
That's true.
And so when you do what you said, when you expand your comfort zone, you give yourself a lot more choices in life. And that's really important.
And then you realize you're capable of doing so much more than you thought you could.
Yes, exactly. And and whether you're supposed to achieve what you want or not, that's not up to you. Basically, you're supposed to work hard. There's a spiritual aspect to it. Sometimes you can try many times to get what you think you want, but the universe pushes you in another direction, and it's important to be open to that and not to think like if things don't work out the way you want, that you're the ultimate victim of the universe, that things work out for everybody, but not you.
Right, right.
Because sometimes it just means that you're supposed to come from another direction.
Try a different way.
Yeah, so it's all about thought. And that fascinates me, that you can change your thoughts, which is why I talk about don't believe your thoughts, because sometimes your thoughts are not valid. So my thoughts told me I needed to stutter. My thoughts told me a lot of incorrect messages. And, that's what led to my first happiness book. I wound up with 8 books, 5 on comedy and 3 on happiness. And the happiness books are the ones that are the most special to me because on Amazon, they became bestsellers. And I want to show you one. The first book that I wrote about happiness, it was called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get a dog to sit in lotus position? It's almost impossible, Don. Almost impossible. But
that dog is here. He's focused.
But healing your heart is not about heart disease. It's about letting go of what I call heart wounds. From the time we're children, every time someone hurts your feelings or breaks a promise to you or hurts you in some way, breaks up with you in a relationship, anything like that, it stays inside of us. I call them heart wounds. It's in your heart chakra. And it affects your self-esteem and your self-confidence. And it affects every decision you make in your life. Because every time you have to make a decision, you think about what to do, right? You use your thoughts. But if some of your thoughts are not valid, your decisions aren't going to work for you. So you have to release those heart wounds. And they were, some people were bullied as children. Some people, their parents told them they'll never be successful. Don't bother going to school because you're not going to make it.
Right,
they never grew up thinking that they weren't too smart. And even though we don't want to believe those things, like there's this stupid saying they teach you when you're kids: sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never harm you, which is the furthest from the truth. Because all the bruises you got as a kid healed up a long time ago. But every single one of us can remember something that someone said that hurt our feelings or humiliated us in some way. And those things stay with you and they affect everything in your life. So the book is about learning to release those things, to not let them take over your life. Because if I didn't do that, I'd still be stuttering today.
Right, right.
I had to release the thoughts that were not valid for me and replace them with positive thoughts. And it's certainly not just about stuttering. That's my own personal example.
Right.
It's about any obstacle you face in your life. When you're telling yourself that you can't do something, you're selling yourself short. You need to give yourself a break. You need to be on your own side. And it's an interesting concept to me because you're literally arguing with your own mind. Your subconscious mind is very dangerous. It's the part of your mind that tells you all the negative things that you can't do. You'll never be hit.
But can you reset your paradigm? Can you reset your subconscious?
It takes a lot of work. But that's what I did. That's why I don't stutter anymore. As you see, I don't stutter. And that's one of the reasons I work with other people, to teach them that you can stop stuttering by learning to control your thoughts. I worked very, very hard. I was literally obsessed with curing myself. And now when I introduce myself to people, I never just say Jeffrey. I always say Jeffrey Gurian, because I never want to forget that there was a time I couldn't say my name.
Wow, yeah.
Most stutterers have a very hard time saying their own name.
Wow.
And the reason that I explained to them that makes sense to me is your name is your identity. When you were born, your parents said, okay, this is going to be Don SILL. So you grow up, that's your identity. So if a person is not happy with who they are on some level, it's hard to present yourself to other people. So I couldn't say Jeffrey Gurian. There was part of me that didn't like who I was. So I had to work on myself to make that part of my mind very weak, so I could prove that it wasn't necessary. Those thoughts are not valid. Because if I started stuttering when I was 6 or 7, that means I had a 6 or 7-year-old mind, right?
Right, right.
Now when I'm 30, why am I living with a decision I made when I was 7? If I had to make an important decision now, would I ever call a 7-year-old and ask him what to do?
Yeah.
That would be ridiculous, right? So how could I live my life with a decision I made when I was 7? So I use those kind of thoughts to release the negative thoughts that told me that I needed to stutter. And that's what I teach people, that you can change your thoughts. You don't have to stick with your thoughts for your whole life, because some of your thoughts are wrong.
I agree totally. And I think a lot of us get those type of thoughts put into us one way or another. You can't do it. You can't, you're not good enough. All those kind of things. And once you change, and there's also this stigma where if you say you're good at something or whatever, people are like, oh, this guy's full of himself. You're not, it's almost like you're not allowed to say, hey, I'm pretty good at this.
No, but you know what? You are allowed. There's a balance, because we're very willing to admit our faults and our weaknesses. But it's also very important to honor your strengths. It's okay to say that you're good at something, as long as you say, I'm not good at everything, but I'm good at this.
Right.
This is something that I honor that. That's part of self-esteem, because otherwise you just beat yourself down, think, well, yeah, I can only talk about my weaknesses, because otherwise it sounds like I'm bragging.
Right, right.
But if you speak through your heart, then people understand that you're just owning your strengths, which is very important. That's another thing that I teach people, that to own your strengths as well as your weaknesses. Don't only knock yourself down. So much of comedy is self-deprecating humor.
Right.
And if people on the street said to us what we say about ourselves on stage, we'd hit them with a 2x4. But we say it ourselves so that other people don't have to say it.
Right, right. Yeah, that's true. You kind of beat them to it. Yeah, yeah.
Self-deprecating humor. People love that. That's why it's hard for beautiful women to come out on stage and make people laugh, because the audience is just looking at them like, what do they have? They can't talk about that. It's hard to get a date.
Right.
What I mean? It's not going to be believable. So the audience likes it when you put yourself down. It makes them feel better about themselves.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Do you believe in I love the positivity, and I'm trying my best to have a more of a positive outlook. In fact, when I do slip into negative modes, I tell myself, stay positive, Don, stay positive.
No, that's self-talk is very important. Talking to yourself just like that.
Yeah.
Using the word cancel is very helpful. If you get a thought, all of us are a little OCD, Don. So I'll tell you about me. Sometimes I can get a thought and I can't let it go for hours. And I'm like, how can I think about something that long? Or a song. I'll hear a song and it'll just play itself in my mind. And I'm like, I can't, it's ridiculous. So I have to physically take my mind to another place. And a little trick is to use the word cancel. If you're holding on to a thought that's uncomfortable and you don't want to think about it, just say cancel. Or I choose not to think about that at this time. The reason you say it that way is because you have to be very gentle with your subconscious mind. If you say to yourself, don't think that, people don't like to take orders.
Right,
but if you say to yourself, I choose not to think about that at this time, It gives you the freedom to bring back the thought at a later date. So you're not chastising yourself. You're being kind to yourself. So you're saying, I choose not to think about that at this time. I'm going to think about something else.
Very cool. I'm going to do that. I'm going to use that. Also, do you believe in the laws of attraction? So, like, if you think it, and believe in it, it will happen.
You know what? I was friends with Wayne Dyer. Did you know who he was? Dr. Wayne Dyer. He discovered Deepak Chopra. He wrote over 30 books. He passed away in recent years, but he was a consciousness guru. And I got to do radio with him, and we became friends, and an amazing guy. And he wrote about manifesting.
Right.
That was a big thing. That's the law of attraction, is basically manifesting.
Right.
It's a very popular topic these days. It's a difficult thing to do. Supposedly, if your intention is strong, that's the concept. The heart is the most powerful organ in the body, believe it or not. It's 5,000 times stronger than the brain in terms of electrical impulses that it puts out. And so supposedly, if your intention is strong and your intention comes from your heart, theoretically, you can manifest things in your life. So every once in a while, something really special will happen for you, something really good, something that you've wanted for a long time, because they say that any question that you ask the universe will be answered. It may not be answered in the time that you expect it to be, but you'll get an answer somehow, sometimes in a very weird way. And so I believe in all those things. Yeah, it's an art form. Some people say they can do it all the time, but there's also a lot of scams. I get these things and emails all the time. Pay for this course on manifestation.
Right.
You don't really know. Pardon me. There's no guarantee that you can just wish on something and make it happen that very day. But it's very important to think positively, because when you think negatively, that's what you draw into your life. When you think positively, you draw positive things into your life, and people respond differently. They can feel the energy.
Right. Yeah.
When you're in a room, you could be in a crowded room. If somebody is angry or very negative, you can feel it. We're more sensitive than we think we are. And it works the opposite. If someone's very happy, you can also feel that. So we like to be around people who have positive energy. And that's what's nice about being in the comedy world, because we're always laughing. We're always looking for what's funny about that.
Exactly. And that's why I was always drawn to comedy and towards comedians my whole life as well. And but to stay positive, it isn't always easy. How do you handle anger and frustration?
Well, I have a very bad temper, believe it or not, but it takes a lot. It takes a lot for me. I'm very mild-mannered ordinarily, but I don't like things like disloyalty. I don't like people who are selfish. There are certain things that people do that get me really angry. When I get angry, I explode. People don't handle it well because they're not used to it from me. There are some people that are angry all the time. They're just angry people.
Right. Right.
The people in their lives handle it because they expect it. When I get angry, people cry. They don't, because it's so different for me. They don't handle it well. And as I said, I don't get angry often, but when I do, I can't control it. When I'm driving, sometimes that happens to me. When people pull into the intersection and they know there's no room for them, and they don't wait on the corner and they block the box, and now they cause gridlock.
Oh, yeah.
I scream in my car. I'm so angry because it's such an act of selfishness. It's like F you to everybody else. I'm just going to pull out. They know they can't fit because the next street is already filled with cars.
Right.
It's obvious. They know they can't fit, but they do it anyway. And that's when I want to have machine guns on my car. So I can pull up. So I do pull up and I honk my horn at them I hope that I make them uncomfortable. There are some people that you just can't even make them uncomfortable. And these days you have to be very careful because there's a lot of maniacs with guns.
Yeah, you gotta be careful out there.
You have to be careful what you do out there. But how I handle negativity, I remind myself every day of gratitude, all the things that I'm grateful for. You know, I've been studying spirituality for more than 25 years. And what it means, there's a very big difference between spirituality and religion. Religion can be wonderful for people, but it tends to divide us because it puts you in a category, and other people are outside that category. And spirituality brings the whole world together, because all it asks is that you believe in something greater than yourself. Because if you think you're running everything in your life, then you tend to blame yourself when things don't go the way you would like them to. Right? You say, oh, I could have done this. If I only had said that, I should have done this. And you're living in the past, and then you're fearing in the future, and you're losing the now. The whole day goes by, and all you've been doing is thinking about what you should have done years ago and what's going to happen to me tomorrow. And you're not in the now. You're not in the present. So the idea is to understand that you have a path. When I had the heart attack, I'm thinking, why me? Why does this happen to me? The spiritual answer is, why not me? Whoever promised me that my life's supposed to be perfect? Everyone else is supposed to have a heart attack and not me. I had never been sick in my life. The night before, I was out partying with the Sirius XM people. I was at 3 different events. I was never sick. The next day, all of a sudden, I get this crazy heart attack. And I was very lucky. They were able to save me. They put in a stent. It's a long, crazy story. But so I had to tell myself, for whatever reason, this is my path. I need to go through this. You know, when I was on my way to a chiropractor, and I was getting these weird feelings in my chest, and I was hoping it was muscular because I was rubbing it and it felt better. And I'm like, you can't rub away a heart attack.
Right.
So it's nothing. Maybe it's nothing. But it started getting more intense. And it's pouring rain, and I'm standing with an umbrella. And I don't like to go out in the rain because of my hair, as stupid as that sounds.
Yeah.
So I see a police van with 4 cops in it. So I go over to the window and I knock on the window and I say, I'm sorry to bother you, but I think I'm having a heart attack. And the cop says, well, I think you should go to the hospital. And I'm like, well, that's why I'm telling you. I'm not just telling everyone. I thought they were going to say, hop in, and they drive me to the hospital. The cop's like, well, we're stuck in traffic. It'll probably be faster if you walk. So I said, well, where's the nearest hospital? This is on 50th Street between 6th and 5th. I'm facing Radio City Music Hall. So he says, we're stuck in traffic. It'll probably be faster if you walk. So I'm like, well, where's the nearest hospital? And he didn't know. So he takes out his phone. He starts looking for hospitals. And he says to me, do you have Google Maps? You have a picture. I'm standing here with chest pain.
Yeah, but a heart attack.
I have Google Maps. I said, no. He said, I think you should download Google Maps. And that's when I walked away, because it was ridiculous. It was like a Woody Allen movie.
Yeah.
And so I could only get another half a block because the pain was getting so intense.
Holy crap.
So I stop another cop. Same thing. Sorry to bother you. I think I'm having a heart attack. He says, stand on the side. Stand on the side a couple of minutes. I said, are they coming? He's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't call them yet. I was like, nobody was taking it too seriously, Don. And
wow.
I think the reason was because I was very calm.
Right.
All my training, I wasn't panicking. I was telling myself, this is a very weird thing, but this is your path. It doesn't pay to panic because I can't control it. So an ambulance finally came. It was a crazier story than that. They took me to the hospital. The doors wouldn't open. They couldn't get me into the hospital. The guy had to climb up on the door and open it automatic. They were sliding me in it like a credit card on a slot in the rain. And it wasn't until the next day that they realized how serious it was. And they put in a stent and they saved me.
Wow.
But it was a crazy story. And the whole time I had to remind myself, this is my path. Stay calm. You have no control over this. So when negative things are happening, I have to remind myself, you can only believe in these things like you asked about when it feels like your life is going perfectly. It's when it feels like nothing is going right. That's when it's important to believe in these principles, because that's what gets you through.
Right.
You can't panic. You have to stay centered. And you have to understand that this is just happening. It's not happening to you. It's not personalized. If I got stuck in traffic, I used to think it was a punishment. I didn't realize there's
Everybody.
hundreds of people around me that are also stuck in traffic. It's not only because I had someplace to go. We're all stuck in traffic. So it's important to learn to step outside yourself and see the bigger picture.
Right.
That's why I started writing these books on thought and on happiness. And they resonate with people, which is why they became bestsellers. And that's what allowed me to become a motivational speaker. So I turned a negative into a positive, which is
And I
very
think the
important.
fact that you stayed calm may have saved you, because if you were panicking, your heart would have been going more, and then it could have led to disaster. So I think that's
Exactly. And the same with COVID. I had to stay very positive. It was a scary, very scary experience to be sick at that time, to be in the emergency room around so many people that were sick. They were wearing hazmat suits. And, I started thinking of things to make me laugh. And I started thinking, I wrote this book called Man Robs Bank with His Chin. It's got blurbs from Colin Jost and Nick Kroll and Richard Lewis.
nice. And that one's also available on Amazon?
Yeah, on Amazon, because I used to write for the Weekly World News, which was the precursor to The Onion.
Right.
Actually, the guy who created The Onion wrote the foreword to this book, Scott Dickers.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah, and so it's a story. It's a collection of stories like man killed for giving girlfriend a snail instead of an engagement ring. College professor fired for casually removing his spine in class, because you can't do that. He'd remove his spine and then ask the students to help him reinsert his spine. And the students were upset. They're like, what if it goes in wrong? We don't want to be responsible for that. It's like, and man in Wyoming builds family a nest. He lost his home and he was wandering in the woods and wondering where his family was going to live. And he decided to build them a nest. He said, if it's good enough for baby birds, then it'll be safe enough for my family. So
That's great.
So I started thinking of these stories, and I'm laughing in my hospital bed with COVID, with the people all around me are so sick. And I was making myself laugh by just thinking of absurd things, because I love absurd humor. This kind of humor does not offend anybody.
Right. And you've been writing that kind of absurd humor since the beginning of your comedy career.
Yes,
with the guys who walk low.
Men walk low for a living and enjoy it. I showed that stuff to Woody Allen. When I was still in dental school, I had a meeting with Woody Allen, and he read my earliest stuff. And it was all those kind of crazy things about men who walk low for a living. Latin dancing with tools. I had a guy do that. He did the tango with a wrench. That was unbelievable. And so Woody said to me, your stuff is very visual and you should think of making a film out of it. And so years later, I made this series called the Men Who series, which is all those strange things about men who do very unusual things, men who take a pitchfork to the movies. And in one of the films, men who dance where they're not supposed to, starred Peter Dinklage, one of the biggest stars in the world from Game of Thrones. He was dancing. He got arrested for dancing in a no dancing zone.
Yeah, that's pretty cool that you had the early Peter Dinklage before he was he already famous when you got that was early, right? That was before he took.
I met him through the Naked Angels, which is Marissa Tomei and Sarah Jessica Parker, Matthew Broderick. They had a theater troupe on 17th Street. And I was one of the writers whose stuff they read in the very early days, back in the 80s. Yeah. I used to go there with Federico Castelluccio from The Sopranos. We used to go there together. And that's where I got to meet Ethan Hawke and Peter Dinklage. And I asked him if he would be in one of my films. They were films for Playboy TV. And they were inspired. So I made them for the Toyota Comedy Festival. They debuted at Caroline's. That was probably 1992. And just before Caroline's closed, I got to do 2 sets last month.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Jeff Ross invited me to do his last show. He was headlining awesome. For 3 nights. And on his Sunday night show, he invited me to come do a set. And it was really great. It was just 2 or 3 comics and him. And it was an amazing thing. I was so glad because I've been, I've been friendly with Caroline for 40 years. I remember I was at her very first club on 26th and 8th. And it's where I first met Jerry Seinfeld and Paul Reiser. I actually offered to introduce him to a manager. Alan Zweibel had given me my start in comedy, and he was being managed by a guy named David Jonas, who was managing Freddie Prinze. And he was working with me. And I said to Jerry, do you have representation? I'll introduce you. But he didn't take me up on it because I knew he was going to be amazing. He was already so funny.
Yeah.
Just so funny. And I'll never forget that night. And then I was with Caroline's at the Seaport. I used to go there to see Gilbert, who was my favorite comedian for so many years.
God bless him. Yeah.
Bless Gilbert. Yeah, for sure. And I brought Jackie Mason there because I was working. I wrote a movie for Jackie Mason that he bought, but it didn't get made. About he was in a tough Jewish neighborhood where there was a Hasidic motorcycle gang, and there was the Ashkenazis, they were called. And it was a crazy thing. There was a group at the time called Black Shabbos that was a takeoff on Black Sabbath, the heavy metal group.
Yeah.
They were Black Shabbos, and they dressed as Orthodox Jewish men. And I brought Jackie there to see them. I said, we have to use these guys in the movie because they were so funny. So I had great memories with Caroline's,
She's reopening another one though, right? Or is that close for good?
She hasn't, it's not close for good, but she hasn't said what she's doing yet. I was with her on that last night. Jeffrey was there. She's going to be doing something big. She said Caroline's isn't going away, and she's going to be continuing the New York Comedy Festival. They just finished their 18th year.
Yeah.
Louis Ferranda was Louis. Gee, I know Louis since he was a bartender at Catch a Rising Star.
Wow.
Back in the 80s, that's when he started. He was a bartender at Catch, and he would book the club. And then he's been at Caroline's all these years. So it was great. It was sad that they're closing. Whoever let it go made a big mistake because it was the jewel of Times Square.
I was right there. It was a great location. It was
only reason to go to Times Square.
Yeah, right, for sure. You've done a lot. You written how many? 6 books, and now are you
eight books?
8 books, and are you currently writing the number 9 now?
No, I'm okay with this for a while. I'm involved in 2 TV shows. As I said, one is a comedy competition / reality show that I'll be announcing very soon. I'll say it here, but it's going to be shot at a major comedy club in Manhattan. And I found some great talent, some really amazing talent, and it's going to be a very different kind of show. The reality part of it is going to make it very different. And then I was hired as a script consultant on a show that's set in the Borscht Belt days. The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Netflix is going off the air this year. This is the last season.
Right.
This is going to be in the same time period. Hopefully it'll be as successful. Also based on stories. And I was there as a little kid, and I was there as an adult, because it's where I got to meet a lot of the famous comedians that I wanted to write for.
Like Milton Berle, guys like that.
Milton Berle was my sponsor in the Friars Club.
Wow.
That was such a great honor to me that I was friendly with Milton Berle, that I grew up watching him on TV, never thinking I'd know him. And then he would call me up. And I mean,
yeah, that's surreal.
He saved my life once. And I don't say that lightly. I was very, very depressed. I was very sad. It was right after my divorce. And I was coming home one day. It was a snowy day. And this was the day of answering machines. No cell phones yet. It's probably back in the 80s, like 85 or so. And I got to my door and I heard my phone ringing. And I opened the door. I didn't know who it was, of course. I don't even think there was caller ID. And I picked up the phone on the last ring, and it was Milton Berle. And he was calling to invite me. He was being honored as the Man of the Year. And he invited me to come as his guest. And I said to him, you don't know what you just did for me. I said, I've been so sad and so depressed. And for you to take the time to call me, I said, it meant so much to me.
Wow. Yeah.
I think that we were friends. I was his only guest at this event. It was
Wow.
amazing. And I was his guest again at Just for Laughs. Bud Friedman threw an event in his honor.
Wow.
And Bud,
He just, yeah.
just passed away.
Yeah. God bless him.
He always wore a monocle in his eye. So Bud is sitting at the head of the table. Milton is across from me, and then me, the three of us, and then a long line of people. Bud looks at the menu, takes out a monocle, puts it in his eye. I take out a spoon from my pocket, and I put it in my eye like that. And I'm reading the menu. And Bud looks over. He goes, "What the hell is that?" And I didn't know what to say. So I said, "It's very big on the coast." And Bud's like, I'm from the coast. I have never seen anybody do that. And Burl is just looking at me like I'm a lunatic. He didn't know about Spoon Eye. I had invented a character called Spoon Eye that I would walk around like that, as if I didn't know I had a spoon in my eye, and I would just be talking to people. And then Conan O'Brien did that on his show one night, and Cindy Adams wrote in the New York Post, she's like, "I don't know why anybody would want to claim this, but Jeffrey Gurian did that first."
Good. At least she gave you your credit. There you go.
Yeah, see, I can't even hold it anymore. I used to be able to do it much better.
Spoon Eye, ladies and gentlemen.
Spoon Eye, yeah.
Spoon Eye, and what was the guy with the face at your first comedy show?
I'm sorry, I don't know. I didn't hear that question.
What was the guy's nickname at your first comedy show? The MC was the face, something face. Face Boy and Spoon Eye.
I invented Spoon Eye, and then I invented a lot of things. I invented the flashlight that works during the day, because why should people only be able to use a flashlight at night? This way you can see where you're going during the day also.
There you go.
I don't just waste my time. I'm home inventing things.
Right.
I invented the 24-hour stapler. You know, like sometimes you ever have the experience you want to staple something, but it's after midnight and your stapler won't work anymore?
It's checked out.
I invented the 24-hour stapler. You could staple to your heart's content. I invented the battery-operated beard. See, now you don't need that because you have a nice short beard. But there's some guys with a long beard. It stops swinging at a certain point. You need a battery-operated beard to keep it swinging, because a lot of hot young models enjoy a guy with a beard that swings.
That's awesome.
You ever hear anybody say he's happy as a clam? How fucking happy is a clam? Seriously, is that a realistic goal in your life, to be as happy as a clam? I never even seen a clam smile.
Very good stuff. Jeffrey, you're an amazing man. You know, I just love you, man. I love everything you stand for, and I just think you're the best. So thanks so much for taking the time and doing this. Where can people find you, follow you, get your books, and start to like really, and even watch the documentary? Is that public?
Yeah, it's public if they Google it, you know. And I recently had another big honor. I'm on the cover of this magazine, Sutton Place magazine.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's really pretty amazing. You know, it's such a strange thing to have a documentary made about yourself, to see your life unfold on screen. It's very moving. It's a big honor, you know, that people would take the time to put something like that together. And they were working on a longer version, some other people, but the pandemic messed that up. A lot of projects got messed up during the pandemic. But if people want to find out about me, yeah, they can Google that. It's on YouTube. It's also on Vimeo. Just look up Jeffrey Gurian. Who the F is Jeffrey Gurian? And my books, I'll show them to you quickly. They're all on Amazon. Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness. And Richard Lewis gave me another thing for that, a blurb. The others are all doctors. Then there was Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way. And the last happiness book is called Facing Adversity, Stories of Courage and Inspiration. And they're all available as ebooks and paperbacks. My website is comedymatterstv.com. If you know anybody who stutters, I have a specific website for that. And it's called Stop Stuttering Now Gurian, youtube.com. StopStutteringNowGurian.com. There's a lot of information on there, and there's videos of people who have improved their speech, who talk about the sessions, and a lot of cool stuff on there. On Instagram, I'm at Jeffrey Gurian, and on TikTok at Jeffrey L. Gurian. And yeah, on YouTube, man, I have a lot of stuff. It's hard to remember. My Comedy Matters TV channel on YouTube, it's got about 2.5 million views. If every favorite comedian you have is on there, everybody from Jimmy Fallon on down, Kevin Hart, D.L. Hughley, Amy Schumer, Amy Poehler, even women not named Amy are on there.
Very good.
It's Comedy Matters TV, youtube.com/Comedy Matters TV. So there's plenty of stuff if people want to see it. And please don't delete this whole thing before you post it. That's my only request, Don. My only request is don't delete this whole thing.
No way. This is great stuff. This was great stuff, Jeffrey. I appreciate you taking the time. And everybody, please, you got to check out his books and stuff, and definitely a documentary. But his books, I've read a few of them. I've read Fear, and your I forget the title of it, but the one about the comic strip.
Laughing Legend. Well,
yeah,
that was the second version. First, there was Make 'Em Laugh.
I think that's the one I might have read. I actually have it. It's in my archives. I got to.
That was the original, and then they did a second version of it, an updated version called Laughing Legends, because people like Jordan Rock wound up doing so much more, and Colin Jost became the head writer at Saturday Night Live. And he wasn't when I first did the book. He was kind of new, so they did an updated version of it. But thank you. It's so good to be on with you, Don. You also have very positive energy, and I really appreciate that. That's why I said it was so good to see you at the party, and great to do this with you again.
Yes, indeed. This was awesome. Thanks again, Jeffrey Gurian, everybody.